Hello, my name is Brendan. This is All Music is Folk Music. It's been a while since my last video. Things got hectic, as they often do, but my life has slowed back down a little bit now that it's summertime, and I'm hoping to make the best of that time by putting out a bunch of different videos, mostly on synthesis and sound design. I'm hoping to get back into the playlist that I had started in the fall on teaching synthesis and sound design in Helm, but I'll also be using some other gear for a little bit of a side project that I have going, which is an idea I had a couple days ago, which is basically a way for me to commit to making some sort of music every day. And what I'll be doing is picking a different piece of gear or a different software synthesizer every month and making a new patch every day, uploading the video process, and at the end of the month, I will be releasing the patches for download, maybe for some nominal fee like $5 on somewhere like Gumroad. And this month, I'm starting with the Microfreak, which I think is one of my favorite pieces of gear I've ever had. It's an incredibly versatile digital synthesizer put out by Arturia. It's about, I think it was like $250 when I bought it shortly after release. The price may have changed somewhat by now. But it really is a great bang for your buck. It has a lot of different synthesis modes on here. And because it is a digital synthesizer, you can get new patches for it every now and again. Arturia updates it with new synthesis modes. I think there have been 2 major patches at this point, and I think they've added 4 new synthesis modes since release, or 5 if you count the vocoder as well. I'll do a video getting sort of deeper into how this little piece of gear works on a general sense. I'm not going to explain that too much in this video, just for sake of clarity, but I will try and explain my general thought process while I'm going. So with all that out of the way, let's get started. I think for these videos it would be fun to, rather than focusing on just what I'm most comfortable with in these pieces of gear, somewhat randomizing things to make it a bit spicier and more challenging for me. So with that in mind, I'm going to randomly pick one of the synthesis modes to start with, as I will every day. I've written them all down here, with the exception of vocoder, just because it's sort of difficult to talk and vocode at the same time, frankly. So that's been omitted for sake of ease of use. But I have my little dice tower here, and I am just going to roll up a starting synth mode. We got 14, which is the bass sound, which is one that was released in the newest patch and is quite lovely. So I'm just going to go and scroll right over to that and get started. So sounds pretty nice as is already. And I think, as the name suggests, this is a great synth mode for making bass sounds, but I actually think it also works really beautifully for making softer sounds like pads or even arps. And I think today I might want to start with a pad sound. So what I'm going to do is, first things first, I'll start to adjust the envelope, the amplitude envelope. I'll slightly lengthen the attack, and I'll drop the sustain somewhat, give it a bit of decay, and release. That's already starting to get a bit of a nice pad sound. I'm going to go ahead and let's see, there's 2 ways that we could do this. We could either go for a bit more of a lead sound or really go for sort of a chordy pad sound. I think I'll just go full out. I'll turn paraphonic on, so now we can play up to 4 notes, which is sounding nice. And let's start to play with some of the parameters of this synth oscillator. So the bass sound has a couple of different parameters. All of the different synth modes on the Microfreak have 3 different sort of mode-specific parameters. This has the saturate, which basically adds upper register harmonics onto the bass sound, just sort of giving a bit of complexity to the waveform. This is especially useful if you're going to eventually cut the sounds out through the use of a filter. So let's say, for example, I knock the filter down a bit. Pretty quiet now. And if I use the filter amount knob here, which just directly maps the envelope shape to the cutoff frequency, it's a beautiful thing to have just built in by default into this. But if I map the envelope to the cutoff, we now get that nice sort of opening up effect. I don't think I want quite that much, and I think I want it to be a bit of a slower pad. That's a bit of a brassy sound. That's more what I was thinking. So already we're starting to get a nice sort of dark pad. Let's see what we can get by adding in some of this fold here. So, as you can maybe hear, that fold is really changing the overall tonal quality of this sound. With basically no fold, our sound remains rather bassy. But if we start to, here I'll just hold this down. Add in the fold, we can hear things really start to shift towards more of an upper register, sort of less bassy sound. So let's go ahead and... I like the sound of that changing a bit over time. I'm going to try first mapping that to the envelope so that that rises as the filter does. Let's hear that. Maybe we can knock the filter down a bit. And then I think I might also want to try and add, let's say, bring an LFO in. And I think now I can start to think about exactly what sort of character I would like for this pad to have. Is it going to be a bit of a rhythmic, sort of warbling, sort of mellotron-like sound? Or is it going to be a bit more maybe aggressive and percussive in a way? And I think today we'll keep it a little bit simple, and I'll probably just add in a nice little filter, or a nice sort of noise LFO to get a smoothed but semi-random change over time. Maybe go for a bit of a tape sound, where it's not necessarily a totally rhythmic repetition of some, modulation, but rather it's, there's a bit of an ebb and a flow to that change itself. So let's go ahead and get the LFO affecting our timbre. I'm working on starting to use my left hand so that I'm not blocking the little screen. Let's get about 25% to start. And I think I'm going to turn LFO sync off here. This is not something that I necessarily feel has to be tied to the rhythm of the piece. And let's just get it going about as slow as we can. 0.06 hertz. Let's go ahead and just bump up the amount so we can really hear that changing. Nice. So we might also want to add just a bit of that same sort of ebb and flow to the pitch to really get sort of that sort of, I guess, sort of a tape loop sound. So let's go ahead and knock the pitch down by around 0.5 with the LFO. and hear what that sounds like. And you can really hear, it's a fairly subtle effect, but you can really start to hear it if you get, say, a delay or a reverb on the sound, because you'll get sort of different pitches or different variations on the same pitch in the sound, making sort of a chorusing effect if you have them playing slightly overlapped over each other. So I have this running into my digitone, which I use for effects, and I'm just going to add a little bit of delay, a little bit of reverb so we can hear that. Nice, this is starting to sound pretty full. I think I would like to add some change to the filter over time, because right now it feels like there's not a ton of movement in this, and I think that would be one thing that would help to elevate this a bit. So I think rather than using the LFO for this, I would like to make use of the cycling envelope. So I'm going to go ahead and map the cycling envelope to the cutoff, and let's have it, let's just pick some arbitrary point for now, let's say 13, and let's take a look at what our cycling envelope looks like at the moment. So if I turn this all the way up, you'll notice that the fall time and the rise time are rather short for this. It's about 10 to 20 milliseconds. So it'll have a very sort of percussive quality on the filter. Let's hear what it sounds like. It's almost like a granular sound. Even if we, especially if we pump this even more. And, you know, I do sort of like that sound. So maybe what we can do even is just map this sort of rise and fall, just like I was doing with my hand here. Maybe we can have that controlled either by the envelope or by the LFO. Let's try first having it mapped to the LFO. So what we can do here, this is the modulator section, or the matrix, and what we can do is we can actually assign, let's say knob 1, or this little button 1. Let's assign that to the rise of the cycling envelope. We can do that by holding down this button and clicking the parameter we want to change, which in this case is the rise. And now, if I go to LFO, in that same little column, I can have the rise be shifted by, let's say, I don't know, 7 to start. And I'm going to increase that even more. I did start to hear a bit of the change towards the end there. But let's really make it pronounced. And maybe this is an effect that we don't want to have all the time. Maybe we can... I'm just going to change that lower limit a bit. Maybe we can have this come in with the envelope, so as the sound gets a little bit louder, this effect becomes more pronounced and eventually tapers off a bit. So what we can do is we can just go to our matrix again. And I believe there is already one mapped to the amount. So that's just going to change the amount that this is affecting the cutoff filter over time. So let's go ahead and set that to 100. So it's going to be nothing at all when the sound has no amplitude, and it's going to be maximum when it reaches its peak. So we'll hear what that sounds like. think even that might be too pronounced. Let's say maybe 70%. And maybe one thing we can also do is we can start to add some of the press into this. One beautiful thing about the Microfreak is it has this wonderful little keyboard here, which is capacitive. It changes different parameters based on how much skin you have touching it. So we can, let's say, let's have the amount of that, rather than being set to the envelope, delete that parameter, we can have it set to the amount that we are sort of pressing down on the keyboard. So now it can be very sort of interactive. We'll hear what that sounds like. Maybe we can also have that change, we have a free slot over here. Maybe we can have that change the fall. So now, let's have that also set to about 13%. Now, we have sort of a lovely little pinging effect there, which will become especially pronounced. I'm going to put a little bit more delay on here. You can really hear that change over time. It's very cool. And we've gotten this far, and I haven't even mentioned one of the parameters of this particular oscillator, which is the noise function, which is pretty cool, and it doesn't always do the exact same thing. It is very dependent on what the other settings are for your oscillator. What I mean is that let's say that we increase the amount of fold that we have here. The amount of saturation as well. It'll start to play with them in slightly different ways. It's fairly complex, and I frankly don't fully understand exactly what it does. I just know it makes things sound nice. But I think that would be a nice thing to add in as well. I think one thing I would like to do now is go to our settings. I think I'd like to add some envelope legato. And I would like to go ahead and change the glide mode to sync. And I'll explain what those two things did in just a second. I'm just going to add some glide to this now, so we can maybe go in between chords. It's getting a very nice sort of crackly quality to it. It's pretty lo-fi, sort of very William Basinski type of sound. But yes, so now the envelope legato basically means that if I hold down a key, each time I retrigger a note, it's not going to start back at the beginning of the amplitude envelope. It'll sort of pick up where it left off, which is especially nice with having this glide in here, because it makes things just a bit smoother. You don't have as much of the ducking that you would with this long attack. switching from note to note. And I think I would like to add one last thing, which is I'm just going to map. Actually, you know what? Maybe I can change two things. So the last column of this matrix here is the key/arp. And basically, it is a key tracking function, so that the higher up the note is, pitch-wise, that basically, if you're considering 0 to be the lowest note, 100 is the highest note. So a nice thing that you can do is that you can map that to the cutoff. So that as the pitch gets higher, the cutoff of the filter slightly rises. Oh, no, that's rise time, which also might be interesting. Yeah, actually, you know what? I'll add a little bit of that in just so there's some variation in the rhythm across the keyboard. But what I would really like to do is add it to the cutoff. And let's get that about 50, 60. So now as we go higher, and you can really hear the noise up in that higher register. I'd probably end up filtering quite a bit of low end off of this, whenever I recorded it, because there is quite a lot of bassy activity, which makes sense. It is a bass sound. But in any case, now we can play low. The filter stays low and it opens up as we go higher. And I think I'm probably going to leave that pad here. I'm fairly happy with it, and I think we can get some nice little sounds out of that. Let's, go full pad here, and I'll bump up the reverb and the delay on my digitone for the effects. Let's hear what we can get. Maybe a bit more release here. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. Go ahead and save that preset. Save it as a pad. I have a terrible tendency, because I get so annoyed by the naming menu, to just keep as many of the letters here as I can. So I have a lot of them that end in IT. I think I'm going to not do that today. Let's go ahead and call this... I'll call it ping, because it sort of pings. Ping. Save that. And that's our very first patch. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll probably get into a bit of a faster rhythm as I go on through these, and I'll have to explain maybe less. But I'll be uploading this, and you can look for another one hopefully the next day. Thanks for tuning in, and have a great rest of your day.